Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. I'm Vicky Fraser and today I'm joined by Systems Whiz Ashlee Berghoff of A Squared Online. And Ashlee is joining me to help writers with a few tips on how to get more organised and stop flailing around like a drunken octopus. So welcome Ashlee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Vicky. I love being here.
Oh, great. I always start off by asking my guests what they're reading at the moment. So what are you reading at the moment?
So I just started a book club this past week, kind of to start doing the work of anti-racism education and things like that. So we're starting the book called White Fragility. And also for the last couple of months, I've been working my way through To Kill a Mockingbird because I'm one of the few weirdos who wasn't asked to read that in high school. So I felt like it was time to finally read one of the main American classics. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Oh, cool. I'm going to ask you about To Kill a Mockingbird in a moment because that's one of my favourite books. But yeah, I'm currently reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, also doing the work. And it's eye-opening and awesome and horrifying and yeah, just and there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. I've been arguing on the internet with people this afternoon. Like I need to just do that. But yeah, so tell me, how are you enjoying To Kill a Mockingbird?
It's been just a really fun chance to read. I actually was an English major in college, which is why it's even more crazy that I had not read it before. But I think because I was reading for school, I kind of came out of the habit of reading for pleasure. And really this year is the first time I'm trying consistently to get back into that. And it's just so beautifully written. I'm only halfway through. But just, it's, the best way to learn how to write is to read well, right? And so it's just good to immerse myself in such talented writing. So I'm loving it so far.
Oh, I'm really glad you're loving it. It's one of my favorite books. So, okay, but let's talk about you a little bit. Your tagline is Operations Strategy for Normal People, and I love that because whenever I read some of the bullshit morning routines that like successful people have and they share around on social media, I'm like, these people have got to be robots. So, so talk a bit about that. How did you get into organizing entrepreneurs, and what do you do?
Yeah. So I've always loved organizing. I did it for fun when I was a kid. When I was bored on a Saturday, I'd reorganize my room. And when I graduated from college, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but it was always in the back of my head that this was this kind of random thing I was really good at and absolutely loved. And kind of stumbled into the operations and HR world within kind of a nonprofit and then a corporation. And especially right towards the end of my last corporate job, it was very, very fast paced. My boss was a machine. She could get so much done and she did not take excuses and she expected efficiency. And I was meanwhile in an MBA program and planning a wedding. Wow. So it was a very stressful time in my life. Yeah. I know you and I have connected about this. During that time, I felt so out of control of my schedule and just always so behind that I would fantasize about just, getting hit by a car, injured, so I could spend a few days in a hospital and catch a break. It was just awful. But through that experience, I kind of found a system that worked for me to kind of keep up with everything, to make sure the things that absolutely needed to happen, the things that really mattered to me were happening, and to let the rest go. And when I left my corporate job and started working kind of as a virtual COO and a business manager for small businesses, I brought some of that experience to them. And over the experience of working with them, I saw that, they had kind of specific challenges that they came to me with, hey, I want to launch this course, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. But I discovered that a lot of the real challenges undergirding all of that was how to focus, how to cut out the noise, how to feel productive and understand what that means and what organization means in real life, rather than, some of these posts that we read about with just these impossible to reach routines and expectations for productivity. And our expectations for ourselves are so high that we always feel like we fail. And so this year I'm really wanting to focus on how do I work with my clients to get to a point where they feel in control, they feel calm, they feel focused, they know what they need to be working on at any given moment, And they don't have that constant nagging feeling that, what if I'm missing something? What if I'm late on something? What if, you know, and how can I help them then leverage that into growing beyond being a freelancer, if that's what they like? Because a lot of my clients hit a ceiling with that and want to keep growing, but are out of time, right? So that's what I do, and I love it, and I'm passionate about finding kind of human-sized, real-life ways to help people be, you know, build a business that works for them in the way that they are in the world. So that's what I do.
That sounds great. And I just wanted to say thank you as well for sharing your very honest story about, you know, it would be, yeah, the being hit by a car thing. Because I know we talked about this before the podcast, but it's like, I have been there and I've been like, oh, maybe I could just fall down the stairs. And then I couldn't get out of bed for a bit. And it's just like that. When that thought pops into your head, you know there's a problem. And I'm sure we are not the only two people to ever think that. So thank you for saying it out loud, because it's just one of those weird things that you feel really ashamed of thinking. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's a thing that shows there's a problem. So, okay, so apart from the wanting to be hit by a car or fall down the stairs, what problems do you see in people's businesses that are caused by a lack of organization and focus?
A few big ones are, my clients often find themselves spending a good chunk of time every day trying to figure out what to do. And they're frustrated by that, right? They're digging through their inbox, trying to figure out what they need to be working on, and then kind of sitting there staring at the screen because they have these big ideas, but they're huge, right? So they're like, oh, I want to launch a course, but you can't just sit down and launch a course, right? You have to figure out what to do to make that happen, right? And so there's a lot of time that my clients spend every single day trying to figure that out, and that can be a huge frustration point. Another one that I didn't anticipate, but as I started talking with people and they, you know, started to trust me, I heard it more and more of just feeling like their business is a clown show or a circus, or they're out of control, or they are unproductive, right? So it almost becomes a self-identification of, I'm not organized, I'm not productive, I can't do this. And that's really hard to recover from, because even if you have a really productive day and then the next day you're less productive, because that's the cycle of life and mental energy, they'll remember that day that they weren't productive much more than the day that they were, according to the standard that they have. So there's kind of this huge expectation on themselves in terms of what productivity means, and then it becomes this kind of ingrained sense of failure and feeling out of control in their business.
Okay. Can I just jump in there and just ask, because that's one of the things that I found, and it's really interesting that you brought that up, because I will have like an amazingly productive day. I'll be up at 5 and I'll just get so much done and it'll be fantastic. And then the next day I'll just be kind of like, you know, I might achieve one half of the thing, and then like you say, you beat yourself up. So is that normal? Is it normal to not be able to sustain that kind of productivity all the time?
Yes, very much so. Very normal. And I learned this kind of in corporate, just kind of watching my own cycles, where I'd have a day where I was a machine. I'd knock out 25 things and clean out my inbox. And then the next day I was totally useless. And I was like, why is this happening? But if you think about it psychologically, you know, we think of our energy in terms of time, right? This took me an hour, that took me 2 hours. Therefore it took 2 hours worth of energy. But we have the way our attention and our kind of mental load works is, when you strain it one day, it needs to rest the next day, just like any other muscle. And so there, a lot of what I work with my clients on is finding a rhythm that they can sustain. Because and you'll hear this from some people who are super type A, very high achievers, find a way to operate at that level, they get sick, right? Yeah. Their body will shut down. They end up in the hospital. They end up having a breakdown. They end up passing out in the middle of a meeting, right? And so even if you can find a way to maintain it, your body will at some point make you rest. And that's what we hope to avoid. But yeah, it's very normal.
Okay. So how do you work with people then to help them find that rhythm? What do you look for? What do you advise people to do?
So a lot of what we do, we work with a lot of our clients on a long-term basis. And so we kind of take things one at a time. And usually at the beginning of our relationship, it's all about just kind of clearing out some of the noise and the mess in their head. So we'll do brain dumps where they're just talking at me. I want to do this and I want to do that, but I have to do this and this is going on and then I have to do this. kind of get everything out of their head and help them see it. Because most of it is this really helpful realization, like, oh, that's why I'm stressed out. I'm holding all of that in my head at one time, right? So we try to pull that out and then start solving some of those problems, looking for the biggest pain points one at a time. And so for some of them, it's like, hey, I have an event in 6 weeks, so we'll just focus on that, help them get that out. Like, we can't do deep work on the rest of your operations right then. Like, you have a deadline, let's get that done. For others, we might do, for one client, we're helping him kind of get to a point where he's not in his inbox all day every day, right? So we're setting up the systems where he'll get notified when certain people email him, kind of his high priority clients and people he really wants to be able to respond to within 5 minutes, right? But then he doesn't have to constantly go back and check. Oh, did this person email me? Oh, did this person email me, right? Because that is using up mental energy that's not actually going anywhere, right? So we'll kind of pinpoint a specific thing to work on to start kind of clearing out the clutter, clearing out the noise. And then over time, the goal is to start building some infrastructure into their business, whether that be how they plan, how they deliver to their clients. If they're reinventing the wheel every time, that uses a lot of extra time, or just kind of helping them structure big things down to something they can actually sink their teeth into, right? So it'll be like, hey, here's the 5 things you need to do this week. Let's email that to you. Now you have that list instead of sitting down every day and trying to figure out what to do. So it's a lot of just kind of finding them where they are and helping build some structure and some control back into their lives.
And I guess there's quite a big, based on what you just told me, I guess there's quite a lot of, we're not going to fix this all at once. It's going to be like, we're going to take it one thing at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
I worked with a counselor years ago when I was living overseas, and he talked a lot about that from a kind of a heart and soul perspective, right? When in his work in counseling, that, if you're in the middle of a difficult situation, that's not the time to go pulling stuff out and opening the door on your childhood, right? Because right now you got to get through the difficult situation, right? And so he'll get people through that. And then once you're in a more stable place in your day-to-day life, then you can start unpacking some older things. But I think it's the same with how we spend our time and how we run our businesses. If you're in the middle of a disaster zone, the last thing you want to do is think about these things that will take longer now, but save you time in the long run, right? Like, you need solutions today. So we do that stuff first.
Okay, cool. Like triage, I guess.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so I've written like loads of books, and every single time I struggle at least a little bit with getting organized because I run a business as well. And I get a lot done, more than a lot of people done, but I still feel like a crane fly a lot of the time. And I know that a lot of my clients feel the same way, because they tend to be business owners who are like, I really want to write a book. How the hell am I going to do this? How am I going to find it? So I was wondering if you had any top tips for writers specifically about how they can kind of be organized enough to at least start writing a book.
Yeah. So I'm just starting the process of writing a book myself. So I'm still learning all the ins and outs of what that means specifically. But I think in general, when you have a huge project that's long-term, that's important to you, but it's not urgent, some of the same principles apply, right? And so one thing that I talk to my clients about is kind of committing to the work that you want to do, and recognizing that that's going to mean saying no to some other things. Because a lot of times my clients will have these incredible ideas. I'll be like, I'm going to go do this thing. And then 2 weeks later, they have another incredible idea, and they want to do them both. And so without kind of systematically looking at that, they'll try to do both. They won't succeed, and then they'll feel unproductive, right? Even though it was probably physically impossible for any human to do both, right? And so a lot of it is to kind of step back and say, okay, this might mean having one less client, or it might mean not doing this other passion project that I have. Let me find a place to write that down so I don't feel like I'm going to lose the idea, but then I'm going to set it aside and come back to it later. So being willing to kind of cut out the space for the book as an important part of your business, breaking it down into small pieces, right? If you sit down and are like, I'm going to write a book, that doesn't work. Because where do you start? Do you do research? Do you put together an outline? Do you tell people about it? Do you pick a title, right? And a lot of times people end up picking a title because that's the fun part. That feels easier. And it can be harder to dive into some of that deeper work. And so when you have it written down, you can see, all right, yes, picking a title is part of it, but maybe the more important part is starting to do some research or starting to interview people or whatever that might mean. So I would say those are kind of two main ones, like being willing to recognize some, some trade-offs that you'll need to make, being willing to consciously make those, and then cutting it down to small pieces that you can actually do. Because if on your to-do list is, text 3 people to ask for an interview, you can do that. Yeah. You can't look at your to-do list that says write a book and write a book. It's too big.
I'm so glad you said that, because one of my processes is tiny beetle steps. It's like, because baby steps are too big sometimes for some people, so it's like really teeny bits. So I love that. Thank you. Always after tips for writers, obviously I'm going to ask you more about your book that you're writing shortly as well, because that's very exciting. In fact, no, I'll ask you about it now. So how are you fitting writing your book into everything else that you do? And what are you writing about?
Yeah. So it's a constant experiment. And that's one thing that I talk to my clients about too, is that you're not going to arrive when it comes to finding the systems that work for you, right? You'll find something that works and then you'll tweak and iterate and things like that. So what I'm going to try for the next few months is setting aside a large chunk of time once a week to really dive in and kind of do deep work and have that set aside. Especially because in my work, I spend a lot of time on the phone, a lot of time on calls. And when those get kind of chunked apart, I can find myself with these little 30-minute chunks of time to work, which are useless for writing a book, right? You can do a couple emails in 30 minutes. You can maybe do a quick admin task, but by the time I'm like in the mode, it's time for something else, right? So setting aside a big chunk of time once a week is my plan right now, rather than doing a little bit every day. But if I end up, with a different plan, probably what I would do as a kind of plan B would be, all right, every morning, this is my peak time, from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or whatever, I'm going to sit down and do some book related work every day and have that practice. So, people have different things that work for them, but I'm going to start with the batching, try that. And then if it doesn't work, move to seeing if an ongoing daily practice works better for me.
Cool. Thank you. And so tell me about your book.
So one thing I've been really curious about, both in my own experience and my clients' experience, is what it looks like to transition from freelancer to CEO, right? Because when I started my business as a freelancer, in my head, it was kind of a straight line of growing the business from that point to maybe something bigger with a team and things like that. But what I've realized going through it myself is that there's a huge transformation that has to happen that's pretty broad across the entire business, almost to the extent that it's kind of like starting a new business in a lot of ways. How I market looks different, how I spend my time looks different, how I show up to my clients, what we offer to them, all of those things is completely different than it was when it was just me as a solopreneur, right? And so I haven't seen anything out there really talking about that and why it's so hard. And so I know when I kind of hit that ceiling, it was a surprise to me. Like, why is this so hard? Why am I struggling? Why is this so exhausting to figure out how to do this differently? And so I want to talk to people who've made that transition, people who are making it, and really understand what it means to make that transformation, and kind of share that story so people know they're not alone in the challenges of it, and then also have some really clear tools they can use to make it easier on them as they make it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I love the fact as well that you kind of had a look around and didn't really see anything that addressed that. And it's so interesting how you think, oh, there's the book's been written on everything, like literally the book's been on everything. And it hasn't always, you've got to find that angle, and it sounds like you found it. So that's great. And I'm really excited for you.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. It's one of those things where I'm not writing it because I'm an expert on this topic, but because I want to find what those tools are and help my clients make that transition. So
yeah, and that's one of the great things about writing a book as well, that a lot of people don't realize, is how much you learn through the act of writing a book. It's like you will learn a lot about what you do, about what you want to do, about who you are, and it's really very exciting process. So I think you're gonna love it, and I'm very excited.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I'm supposed to have a publishable draft by October, so it's going to be some deep work for a while here.
Oh, you've got this. You're super organized. Okay, so quick question on delegating, because if you're a company of one like I am, obviously I can't do everything. I tried to do everything myself for quite a long time, did not work, and now I have a Harriet who is wonderful. So can you talk a little bit about delegating? Give us a few tips on how to start, especially if you're on a really low budget, because it can be really difficult to think, I haven't got that much money, I need to do it all myself.
Yes. Yeah. It's tricky in the beginning. And one thing I talk to my clients about is, like everything else, it's iterative. It's an experiment. You have to be willing to maybe be bad at it for a minute. But one thing I have learned in my own experience of learning how to lead is, as a business owner, when you start that process of delegation, you're building a skill set for yourself as well, which is learning how to lead another person. And that's a different skill set than learning how to do something yourself. And so it's okay for it to take longer for a while than doing it yourself, right? Because you're also building a skill set. Because I think a lot of times people will say, oh, well, I could have done that myself so much faster. And then this whole thing is a fail. I'm not going to do it again, right? But the point is, you're building a relationship with that person. You're building the skills yourself. And how do I communicate effectively? How do I provide good feedback? How do I make it clear what I need here? And things like that. So giving yourself space to learn how to lead and recognizing that that's what you're doing. Because I've also seen some business owners think, okay, I have this problem, i.e. I'm out of time, I'm disorganized, I have so much to do. I'm going to hire a VA and that's going to fix my problem, right? And it doesn't quite work, because the VA will come to them and say, all right, how can I help you? And they'll be like, I don't know, just do some stuff, figure it out. I don't know, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing a bunch of stuff and you just got to keep up. And the VA can't, and it doesn't work, and it's a struggle, right? So I always recommend saying, you know, hey, step back, recognize that you need to learn how to be a boss, and you're going to have to figure out what you want and what success looks like and things like that. And you can start with one task, like say it's, you created a YouTube video and you want that turned into a blog, right? You can record yourself doing it one time. You could make a template. You could kind of put together, you know, a quick checklist of what you want to see in the finished product, and start practicing and how you can give that information to someone else so they can follow along and give you something that you're going to like, right? And be okay with the process of going through that. And that can be really helpful in setting the right expectations too, of I'm learning how to lead, you're learning how to help me. It's going to take a little while. We're not going to get it right the first time, but I need to do the work on my side of communicating effectively to you of what I need from you, right? So that can be a process that takes a little bit of time, but will, you know, is the only way really to grow beyond yourself ultimately, right? And another thing, I actually learned this from a woman named Brienne Dick at the MNIB Consulting, is kind of setting up a structure for yourself of how you delegate, how you share tasks. So we actually have a type form that we fill out. It has, you know, who the task is for, what's the outcome that you want to see happen, what are the success metrics that make that what you want it to be, when's the deadline, here's all the, you know, here's all the resources you need, here's a Loom video of me explaining the backstory and what's going on with this. And that provides a very clear structure that then when I fill out that form, I know my VA has everything she needs to knock that out, right? And if she achieves the outcome with all the success factors in mind, then it is my job to not add more stuff in later or say, oh, you didn't do X, Y, and Z. If it's not on the list, it doesn't get done. That's not on her, that's on me, right? And so it makes this very clear expectation too of kind of thinking through what you want to see happen, right? So if I send her something like, hey, write me an email for this client, and I don't have in the success metrics that it's formal and that it's has this attachment and that it has, you know, a hello part and a goodbye part and, you know, all the pieces that I want to see, then I can't be upset if she doesn't include those things because I didn't communicate that she needed them, right? So it makes a good way to grasp onto that. So yeah, I'd say kind of getting clear on what you want to share, learning how to lead and be a boss. And then I feel like I'm rambling, so I'll make the third one short. You know, you can kind of start with one-off projects on Upwork can be a really great way to experiment and learn with a low impact, like low pressure environment and low cost, right? So you can learn how to delegate a tangible project effectively through something like that. It's going to be very inexpensive. And once you get used to that, you'll start finding more and more things you want to give to someone else, in which case it's maybe time to start bringing someone on board for yourself.
Okay, thank you. They're great tips, because I remember how it is quite a learning curve,
Yes.
having somebody do stuff for you. And I remember it being very difficult to let go of stuff, and then it
Yes.
being like, you can't just throw stuff at people and expect them to get on with it.
Yeah.
And I'm so lucky that I've had Harriet, because she's amazing and she's put up with so much crap from me. Yeah, we're running out of time. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, so I'm just gonna be like, right, I'm gonna come back to you like next year after you've written your book, and we'll talk.
I love that.
We'll talk more, because there's so many things I want to ask you about knowing, deciding what to do, and how to decide on what to do, and your planning process and all sorts of stuff. And we haven't got time, so I'm going to leave that as a teaser for having you come back. But if you could leave the listeners with just one thing to think about when they're getting organized to write a book, what would it be?
That's a great question. On the organization side, what I would recommend is kind of going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, kind of setting expectations for yourself that you can achieve, right? If you sit down and you're like, I'm going to write 10 pages today, you're going to end up feeling badly about the fact that you wrote 5, even though 5 is a great accomplishment in one sitting, right? Yeah. And so kind of stepping back and even just taking a minute to say to yourself, like, is this realistic? If I'm putting 10 things on my list for today, is that realistic if I think about the fact that I have 4 meetings and a toddler, or, whatever it might be, and kind of cutting that down and being willing to do that without feeling like you're an unproductive human. And what you'll find is you actually make more progress. You feel like you're winning, and you'll be able to ramp up from there, right? And you'll have that sense of momentum and success. But I wonder if part of the reason people sometimes struggle to write a book is they expect too much of themselves too soon.
Definitely. I would say definitely is the answer to that question. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I like the idea of setting stretch expectations, but not unreasonable ones, something that you'll be really proud of achieving, but not that you will feel like crap if you don't manage to do it.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. I think my biggest takeaway from this personally is the whole we work in cycles thing. And it's like, if you're going to have a really productive day one day, then the next day might not be so much, and that's okay. And, maybe you need to have a rest. So that, I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah. So my website is asquaredonline.com. Squared is spelled out, so the SQ version rather than a 2. Yeah. So asquaredonline.com. And the easiest way to kind of become part of my orbit is I have a free assessment there called the Fix This Next Assessment. And basically all it is some yes or no questions that you answer that will help you pinpoint the one core vital need in your business, so you can focus. Because especially when we are the entire business in one human, we can be really scattered. And so it can help say, all right, this is the one thing you can focus on, put your best work here, and that will help you grow your business faster. So that's there, it's free. And that's where you can learn everything about me.
That's amazing. Thank you. That all sounds fantastic. I'm definitely going to point people towards that. asquaredonline.com to find out more about Ashlee and what she does. Ashlee, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really great. I've learned so much. I love interviewing people. I'm definitely going to be back in touch with you later in the year or early next year when you've written your book, so you can come and talk about your book. Do keep me informed on that, because I'm very nosy and I get really excited when people write books.
Well, it's always good to have someone on my team. It'll keep me accountable too. So I really appreciated talking with you, Vicky. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Right, next week, Joe will be back with me and we will be talking about something to do with writing books. I don't know what yet. In other news, what's going on in my world? Well, you can sign up for my blank page to book in 90 days course. The waiting list is open. If you've listened to, I should probably give a URL, moxiebooks.co.uk/90-day book course live. Link is in the notes. If you've listened to every episode, email me with your postal address and I will send you a silly gift. And if you like this podcast, please go to iTunes and subscribe and share it and leave us a review. We love reviews. And again, thank you, Ashlee. This has been fab. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a good day.